They say the longest journey a man will ever make is the 6 inches from his head to his heart. I've lived my whole life in my head. What I did from a very early age, for whatever reason I don't know, doubt, insecurity, fear, what I did is I buried my emotions and I suppressed them. And what I did is I used my mind and my ego to basically navigate my way through this world. I used my mind to basically protect myself from pain. Of course, in the end, most of the pain I experienced was based on my mind. But at the time, thinking was a lot easier than feeling. And it might not have been the right decision, but it was the only decision I knew at the time.
I used to light up when I'd hear you sing. I used to get upset when you tell me anything. But you don't know who I am anymore.
I remember asking a bunch of people separately if they thought they were open-minded, and within an instant, every one of them said yes. I actually then approached someone who I considered very open-minded, and I asked them the same question. And their initial response was they'd love to think that they were open-minded, but in all honesty, they would have to consider it. And I started to laugh because the first 20 people who considered themselves open-minded, I asked them one question: are you open-minded? And they immediately gave the most closed-minded response that they can give. They never considered it, they never reflected on it. It was an absolute answer that they gave. Whereas someone who's open-minded, every question you ask, there's going to be the reflection, there's going to be an openness to it. And this is important to me because when I think of religion, I think of absolutes. When I think of my religion, being raised Roman Catholic, our way is the one and only way, Jesus is the one and only Son of God, this is the one way to salvation. It's all about absolutes. And to be quite honest, religion isn't really about absolutes. It's about a journey or a path within yourself. It's about surrendering your ego, your mind. It's about awakening what's in. It's about bringing yourself into a greater degree of awareness. When you go deep enough, you realize that the entity there that claims absolutes doesn't exist. Where if you look at someone like Jesus, he completely surrendered himself. He didn't defend himself. He wasn't aggressive. He didn't try to control people. He didn't try to rule over people. He completely surrendered himself to God, to the moment, to everyone around him. And he lived the truth. He didn't try to force it upon anyone. He awakened it within himself, and he offered that. But it was never aggressive, and it was never forceful. It was never manipulative. And to be honest, he didn't grab a bunch of children and start brainwashing them to believe something. He understood that the answer wasn't within the contents of our mind. It wasn't a conclusion. It was actually the greatest awareness and having the ability to surrender your mind. There's no way that he would actually go and start brainwashing children and trying to control them. That's what I don't understand. A priest who's supposed to be closer and more in tune with this person Jesus than anyone around, he's supposed to be our mediator between the divine and between us. And within that same breath, there's such division and misunderstanding where one person lived the truth and one person, it's based on their idea, their thought, and their belief in truth. And if they can't see that that's separate from the truth, what are you teaching someone? Why would you give someone that which is false within you? Live it yourself, surrender yourself, and let that be the example.
There's a story about a man. Walking with the devil. Up ahead they see another man.
What was that?
Bend over suddenly.
What did he pick up? He picked up a piece of truth.
truth. Wouldn't that be bad business for you? No. I'm going to help him organize it.
I don't mean to be disrespectful, but if you took all your Jewish people and raised them Christian, they'd be Christian. And if you took all your Christian people and raised them Muslim, they'd be Muslim. And if you raise your Muslims as Hindu, they'd be Hindu. And if your Hindus as Buddhist, they'd be Buddhist. And your Buddhists as Sikhs, your Sikhs as shamans, your shamans as Wiccans, your Wiccans as Christians. You could basically flip around the whole spectrum. If who you are and who your faith is no more than what you were conditioned at birth, then how can that way be the one and only way? How could that truth be the one and only truth? Should I have just been happy that I'm Roman Catholic, that I'm right, that my way is the one and only way, that I get to go to heaven, even though 4 billion of you are going to hell? That seemed really ignorant. It seemed based on fear and control and self-righteousness. I didn't want to be a part of that.
Hey, my heart's been true to you through it all. We tried our best through all the months till it ended in the fall. The sun will set, the moon will rise, and in the end we'll cry. And through it all we had it all, but our love had to die. It had to die.
I was also raised to believe that one day God would come and would judge us all, and more specifically would judge me. Now, if there is a God and he created all this and wants to judge his work, that's fine. But my question is that who's judging him? And I say that in the sense that I didn't create all the corruption in the world, the poverty, the suffering, the rapists, the pedophiles, division, the religious conflict. All the suffering and pain that's going on in this world was created from that one source. And to go one step further, I've been told that there's a devil in this world, this most evil of entities that kind of rules over the darker side of this world. Now, in the beginning there was God, only God, all God, omnipotent, omnipresent. And if there exists a devil and this most evil of beings, wouldn't the all-knowing entity that created him be even more evil? If God, in all his knowledge, created the devil and put evil into this world, wouldn't that make God the most evil? If in the beginning there was only God, and God created everything, then how can there be any separation? How can there be any division? I believe that God made revelations to the whole world, not just to one group of people, or not based on one individual. I believe that at different times in different places, based on what was needed, that certain men and women were brought into a greater degree of awareness and consciousness, and were able to pass on revelations based on a higher truth or a higher intelligence. At a certain point, I realized that I wasn't figuring this out. And even more importantly, what I started to realize that the answer wasn't in the contents of my mind. That this wasn't going to be a logical conclusion and something I could figure out like 2 + 2 = 4. What I started to realize was truth wasn't actually the conclusion that my mind made. Truth was actually bringing my mind into full awareness where I could actually surrender it. Now, I know that word surrender, it's kind of loaded. It kind of brings notions of quitting or giving up. The thing is though, is in the beginning, if there was God, and God had all control and all power, for me to exist, for me to have my individuality and my consciousness, God had to surrender a part of who he was. Otherwise, how could I be free? He would still be controlling everything. So if God's highest truth is creating me and surrendering himself for my freedom, then as a human, it seems like my highest choice would be to bring myself into awareness and to surrender that back. And it's not giving it up to God. What it is realizing that connection that we have with him, realizing that there actually was no separation to begin with, and that this suffering and this pain and this perceived separation was essentially the gift of life. It almost seems a little bit like a cruel joke, but what can you do?
Smile today if you're a happy person. Make your way your own and don't be afraid, don't be afraid, 'cause everybody is searching for something with selfish things, but after all we're just human beings.
Once I realized how much I was struggling and how difficult this was, on top of that also how far I've gone into it in selling a condo, quitting a job, distancing myself from people, isolating myself, it almost seemed like I had gone too far to turn back. And what I did at that point wasn't the smartest of things. In hindsight, it was actually really dangerous and really stupid. But I went to war with myself and I went to war with my mind. And what I decided to do, whether consciously or unconsciously, is I decided to smash my mind into a million pieces. And I figured with all my life experiences and everything that I learned, if I could put it back together, then I'd have something of substance. Then who I was would be, in essence, my creation, and not a product of my environment, a product of external influences, and not necessarily lost in the vastness of the unknown, but bringing that into light and bringing that into awareness.